Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to all my guys, gals, and non binary pals. Uh, I hope you're enjoying seeing me. And I'm going to be a little more serious in this video because I want to undertake a project. And it's a sensitive project to a lot of people. But before I go into it, as always, if you are experiencing a mental health issue and you think a permanent solution is the answer to a temporary problem, I ask you turn this video off and you dial 988, which is equivalent to the 911 for mental health. I am not a mental health professional. They are. Your life is more important than me getting a view. You mean something to this world. Please stick around, regardless of what you're going through. Okay. So I've been making a lot of funny videos recently, and I will continue to make these funny videos, but I want to take on a long-term project. And this project is I want to understand racism against the black community in America today. This is not something I can understand from personal experience. A little bit about my own history. I was obviously born white, and I looked up the most appropriate terms. And white and black seem to be the most commonly accepted terms for someone's color. If anybody has an alternative viewpoint on that, please put it in the comments. This is a learning experience for me because I can never know what it feels like to deal with the atrocities of racism that the black community has. It's not something I can feel from personal experience, but it's something I want to understand very much. So, have I ever been a victim of racism or prejudice? In the most technical sense of the word, yes. But just by saying yes, I feel I'm downplaying the experiences of the black community in America. Have I dealt with a little anti Semitism? I have. I'm not here to talk about that. It was not something that vastly affected my life. And to even compare it to the black experience in America would border on the offensive. But technically, the answer would be yes, but not really. I was born, as I said, Caucasian into a linearly Jewish family of decent means at the time I was born. I wouldn't say we were rich, but we were very comfortable. And I never was fearful that I would go to bed without a meal. I was never fearful that my dad wouldn't come home or would be a victim of violence. These weren't things I ever had to think of growing up. So I can only go into this project from the third person, but I want to understand it. And I think a huge problem in America and the world right now is fear of judgment. And this prevents people from asking questions. This is something I've personally experienced. That being fearful that if I ask a question, just by asking the question, something will be assumed about me. Let me give an example having to do with my overall project, but before that, not. As people know, there is a very atrociously violent situation going on in the Middle East right now. And I have been oddly quiet about it. I am known for being very opinionated on you name it. And I haven't voiced an opinion on this one. And that's been because I don't have enough information. I really don't. And it's been nearby impossible to find just solid history and data without a motive on this. Now, if I wanted to be like argumentative Ian, I could play it one of two ways. I could have to stick with my team. I'm a Jewish person, although I don't subscribe to the beliefs, but I could say, this is they're my people. Israel has a right to defend itself. And I could move my research in a way where I'm sure I can make a convincing argument of that. On the flip side, I believe I can make as convincing argument being the rebel Jewish person. Talking about the atrocities that Israel has performed and make as convincing an argument. And in doing so, I could piss a lot of people off and not learn and grow as a person. Which is why I've sort of sat back on this one and just tried to learn. Now I want to talk about fear of judgment when it comes to a racial example. Because I cannot go into this project with fear. Because if I do, it will fail. Oftentimes, I would hear mocked. People would say, people would justify themselves as not being racist by saying, I have a black friend. And for years, I was confused why that didn't make sense. That made sense in my mind. How can somebody be racist but have a black friend? But I just went along with the ride and I pretended like I understood because I didn't want to be judged a racist myself. So without any knowledge or understanding, I just said, yeah, anyone who says that, then they have to be. Until I had a coworker who was black, and we would have some pretty intense conversations. And after being his coworker for 3 years, I felt comfortable enough to ask him why a white person having a black friend isn't evidence of them not being racist. And he gave me the answer in 30 seconds. I'm not going to say what it was because I'm just going to... The point of this video is to describe the project. but it made sense. And now I can go at that question with real understanding, not Falk's understanding. He explained it to me in 30 seconds. But for years, I was too scared to ask the question. And I feel that's what's happening in our society. On June 8th of 2020, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer wore kente cloths and knelt down in the rotunda in Congress. And they knelt down for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to symbolize the amount of time that Derek Chauvin put his knee on George Floyd's neck, causing his death. The Democrats all said that was a wonderful thing. All the Republicans said that was for show and it was racist in and of itself. I didn't even know what a kente cloth was. But I couldn't get information to form an opinion. So, like always, I went with my tribe, which was the Democrats. But I did so without knowledge because I was scared to ask the questions. Because I thought if I asked a question, it would lead to an implication. To bring this a step further, I was very confused at the martyrdom of George Floyd. I believe he was murdered. I believe Derek Chauvin was a racist police officer with the intention of taking his life. At the same time, if you were to look at George Floyd's record, it wouldn't describe a man who should be respected or looked up to. And I was scared to ask anybody why. Because there are murder victims every day who didn't do some of the things that George Floyd did. But I was too scared to ask anybody, to open my mouth. And I still don't have an answer to that. And hopefully through this project, I will get a better understanding. Because I need to be fearless. And if I'm going to understand racism in America, I need to be able to ask questions without fear that implications will be made about me, or realize if they are, they're not true. So, my first introduction to something that could be interpreted as racist in my own life, not to me, but observation of, was when I was roughly 12 years old. My family had just moved from New Jersey to Arizona. However, I entered some competition where I got to go to Washington, D.C. and take a tour around, and it was actually a very good experience. And I got a girlfriend there, and she was half black and half white. And that's all I remember about her to this day. I don't remember her name. I don't remember where she was from. But when I came home and told my parents, they were happy You know, I was not raised in a racist house. And I will say that over and over and over again. There was nothing in the house I grew up in that would make somebody think I was raised in a racist home. What I'm looking forward to, though, is seeing if that applies to my parents as well. What was said behind closed doors when they were growing up during the civil rights movement. I digress, though. So, my my parents weren't really a fan of my only living grandparent at that point, which was my mother's father. At that point, my other three grandparents had passed away. And they told him about my girlfriend, who I would never talk to again, how she was half black and half white, as a means to upset him. And that confused me to know it. Just, I didn't get it because I was always just taught in school racism bad. So my grandfather can't be, can't have any racist thoughts because he's my family. Probably not the case though. And so that was my first like experience, but I didn't understand it. And I really didn't have enough time to ask because he passed a few months later. I'm going into this project without a conclusion in mind because when I research to a specific conclusion, it's not fair research. But I have ideas of why there are the issues in America still today. And they really come down to education. It wasn't until 4 years ago that I knew what Juneteenth was. I had never heard the term before. That wasn't a me problem, that was a school problem. That should have been taught to me. It's something that should be celebrated, and it should be celebrated by all. But I didn't know what it was. That's an issue. Now, yesterday, I did my first like clickbait short where I said Jim Crow was not a racist Southern legislature because people might read that and be a little confused. But I had a very specific purpose in mind because Jim Crow wasn't a real person. Jim Crow was a type of theater put on by the North in the 1830s, 30 years before the start of the Civil War, to mock and degrade black people. It was called Jim Crow theater. And then, after the Civil War and Reconstruction ended prematurely due to the awful, disgusting compromise of 1876, they brought the term Jim Crow back and they used it for segregationist laws in the South. I was not taught this in school. And this is something I can guarantee you I was not taught in school. because I know what spawns my interest and what bores me. Physical science classes, in one ear, out the other. Like biology, physical, it just never interested me. But anything having to do with American history, I was in the front row. And one of my hobbies at the time of my schooling was theater. So you have my favorite topic combined with my favorite hobby. I would have remembered that. But I went all these years assuming that Jim Crow was a racist, segregationist, Southern legislature. And I believe that is the common belief on where the term comes from. And it's not being taught correctly. And that has to be fixed. It really does. Things also need to be put in perspective as well. And I'm going to give two examples of two different people. First, I'd like to talk about former President Lyndon Baines Johnson, who is known for overcoming the filibuster to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1965. An amazing accomplishment, and something that made the world a better place. But what was his motive? Was it because he actually felt for the black community? Or because he wanted to get these ends, this is the quote I heard, voting Democrat for the next 200 years? Because that quote is oftentimes a test put to him about the reason why he fought so hard for the Civil Rights Act, that it was merely political. Now, an interesting quote I was able to find was from his personal chauffeur, Robert Parker, that when he first met Johnson, Johnson asked him if he would prefer to be called by his name as opposed to boy, N-word, or chief. And Parker said he would prefer to be called by his name. And Johnson got very angry and said, and this is the quote that Robert Parker attested to until the day he died, he said, "As long as you are black, and you're going to be black till the day you die, no one's going to call you by your goddamn name. So no matter what you're called, N-word, just let it roll off your back like water, and you'll make it. Just pretend you're a goddamn piece of furniture." That's a very racist thing to say from the president who fought hard for the Civil Rights Act. But that quote, I had to dig deep to find. The 200 years quote is actually not verified. And there's debate as to whether or not Johnson actually said it. The quote I just gave has been verified. So what should his legacy be? How should we look at him? And I don't have the answer to this. These are the questions I want to answer through this project that I'm endeavoring. When Hillary Clinton ran for president in 2016, the Republicans would show a picture, and this is not meant to get political here, because if politics is part of the answer to what the problem is, I'm willing to go there. But this is just a description. They would show a picture of her hugging a man in a Klan's outfit, which was actually a picture of Robert Byrd, who she referred to as a friend and mentor. Robert Byrd was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. That is verified. That cannot be denied. Robert Byrd denounced the Ku Klux Klan on the floor of the Senate. Only former Klansperson, because unfortunately a lot of members of the Klan have been in the Senate, only one to formally denounce them. And he never really endorsed a presidential candidate except once. Oh, by the way, that photo was doctored. It was her hugging Robert Byrd, but the Klan outfit was doctored on him. She never actually hugged him while he was wearing a Klan outfit. That was a false picture. Back to what I was saying, he never endorsed a presidential candidate except once, where he said, "This individual is a noble-hearted patriot and humble Christian. He has my full faith and support." And that was Barack Obama. When Barack Obama got sworn in, he made sure that Robert Byrd was right there. And Robert Byrd wanted to be right there. And they actually formed quite a friendship. So, how are we to judge this? Should we judge him for being a Klansman, which is disgusting, or the fact that he reformed? Again, I don't have the answer. This is questions I want to answer. Now, why am I doing this now? Why is now the right time? I'm happy you ask. I think I can have a honest conversation with my parents about the views on race within their home growing up, without fear that they have to protect their parents, and that if their parents ever did or said something bad, that they would feel uncomfortable saying that, because their parents have been gone for over, it's going to be almost 30 years. And I've had long conversations with both my parents about the shortcomings of their parents in other aspects. If anything, the issue I may have is they may make it sound worse than it was, because both of them don't have a really good memory of their fathers, at least. So the only issue I would have is trying to get them to temper it down to what was actually said in their home when doors were shut. But there's no fear that they have to protect the family and they can't be honest with me and tell me terminology that was used in their homes because they don't feel like they need to be loyal to the memory of their parents. That's not something either of my parents feel. And while that's not necessarily a great thing, I'm grateful for it as it pertains to this project because I believe they will be honest with me. And then there are just things I observed as a child which I always saw as a good thing, as a positive. But keep in mind, my lens is that of a white guy whose family had some money. I don't know what it's like to be pulled over and have any other fear than how can I get out of this ticket? I have never been pulled, and I've been pulled over quite a few times. The first time I was pulled over, I had my driver's license for 3 days. I have never been in fear for my safety with law enforcement. And in fact, every experience, with the exception of one, which is a story for another day, with law enforcement has been positive. Even to the point where I was quite disrespectful to not only an officer, but an officer's wife. And I was still treated with respect when I did not deserve it. But I felt entitled enough to act inappropriately. I don't believe that's the Black experience. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, I have questions. I want to get answers. When I was really young, 8 years old or 7, our family had a Black child who was my age come and live with us. And I always saw this as a very good thing we were doing. And at that point, I was going to day camp, town and country day camp. And I didn't really like him, but only because he was taking attention away from me. Sort of like when my sister was born. She took attention away from me, but it had nothing to do with color. And so I knew 2 things about him. He was Black, and we were paying for him to go to camp while he lived with us. I knew nothing else. I didn't know if he had a 2-parent home, a 1-parent home, a no-parent home. I knew nothing about him. His life was not exposed to me. And I spent 30 years of my life not thinking that maybe somebody would interpret that as just out of pity, or there was something else going on, because he wasn't a friend of a friend. It was put together by, I think, and I hope to interview my parents and get details about this, but there was a company that would organize this. And I was working for a company 10 years ago where I brought this up. And I brought this up just assuming, that it was positive. And a black coworker of mine seemed to get very offended. So I dropped it, but I never asked him why. And it didn't make sense to me why he would find it offensive. Now I have ideas now, but I hope to talk to him now and actually years later ask him that question. Why was that offensive? Because all my other coworkers who were white were not offended by it. He was. I don't know exactly why. I have ideas, but this isn't the Ian Ideas Project. Other examples is my grandfather on my father's side and his third wife, who he would be married to until his death, they had a live-in maid, and her name was Pam. And she was very nice, and I have no memories of her ever being spoken down to or disrespected. Additionally, though, I have no memories of her wearing anything but a maid's outfit. I have no memories of her wearing just regular street clothing. Does that mean anything towards systematic racism? I don't know. But these are questions I hope to answer. Another thing about my own family is it was always a story that back in the late 40s and early 50s, that nobody in Jersey City, New Jersey would give black people car insurance or renter's insurance. But I had a great uncle who would come to the rescue and give them insurance. Now, was this motivated out of a sense of right and wrong? Maybe. Was it a cash grab? Maybe. Or is the whole story just made up? Possible. And I think I can get the answers now, because he has passed away, and enough time's gone by where people wouldn't feel an obligation to give me a false answer to that question. And then I need to look at my own actions. I treat it like a badge of honor that I have never said the N-word. It's never come out of my mouth. But why do I feel the need to brag about that all the time? Whenever, the topic comes up, I am the first to bring up, I have never said that word once in my entire life. Am I just trying to boost my own ego? Or is it something I actually should be proud of? Again, I don't have an answer to this yet, but I hope to get an answer. But what I can tell you is I've been in company where the word has been said and I was silent and I didn't voice opposition. Is that just as bad as saying it? Again, I don't know the answer to this, but it's an answer I want to get. What part do I play in the problem, if any? And what changes do I need to make to be more solution-oriented, if any? Because I don't know. And anyone who's been following my YouTube channel saw that I had a debate about a month ago with my debate sparring individual, Justin, and our topic was who was more racist, Trump or Biden? And think about that. Who was more racist? Neither of us were even gonna bother to make the argument that Trump or Biden aren't racist. It was just which one was worse. The fact that that didn't dawn on me in the moment has bothered me. Now, I do believe that the winner of the 2024 presidential election will either be Joe Biden or Donald Trump, of which I have debated which one was more racist, which means both of them were, or are. What does that say for our country? Or am I reading too deeply into it? I hope to get these answers. Now, that's just the start. That's talking about my own personal experience, and I threw in the comparison to LBJ and Robert Byrd. But once I move past the first part of my research, which is my family, I plan on expanding it into what happened in our country with housing, with white flight, with Black Wall Street. Why is America where it's at today? Now, I've gone on record many times saying I believe systematic racism is real. And it just seems kind of obvious to me. But I've been saying that because that's my tribe with the Democrats. I can't even really give you a solid definition of systematic without looking it up, which I haven't done. But have we become so tribal in America that we don't even form opinions on things like this? Whatever our side says, we just go with, because I know I've done that many, many times. And what got me interested in this is I looked at my own YouTube viewership. And by far, what I watch is black Trump supporters. I'm not black. I am not a Trump supporter. And in watching this, I have not changed my political opinion, obvious. I'm still do not like Donald Trump. But I still watch it. And it started with 4 individuals, but it's dwindled to 3. Van Hall, who's actually I consider a friend, Officer Tatum, Candace Owens, and Jesse Lee Peterson. I stopped watching Jesse Lee Peterson because I don't believe he's authentic or real. I believe he's putting on an act. And I wasn't watching those videos to watch a performance. I was watching him to learn. So once he lost credibility to me, I had no reason to. But I still watch the other 3 quite regularly. Now, I know there's been a debate whether or not Candace Owens is true to her conservative beliefs, and I do believe she embellishes often, but I do believe she is speaking to her beliefs. And once again, my opinions haven't changed on anything. But those are still now the three ones that far and away I watch the most. I'm a I can only learn by watching and interacting with those who have different opinions than me. Yesterday, I went on my friend Gemma Jade's YouTube channel where her, her belief structure is that she interacts with spirits and aliens. I do not believe that. I am an atheist. I do believe aliens exist, but I don't believe they're walking around the earth. I just look at the size of the universe, but that's a completely different topic. And she's a very good friend of mine because I want to understand how and why somebody who I respect believes something that I just don't understand in the least. And I don't understand how somebody of her intellect believes that. And that's how I learn. So, one thing as I wrap this up that motivated me to do this project was actually Kanye West. You notice no one's heard from him for a while, but whenever he starts saying stuff like, I love Hitler, and just the most irrationally dumb things, media moguls are jumping over themselves to get a piece of that. They want that on their show. And I reached the conclusion, and I don't know if my conclusion is right or not. I'm going into this with an open mind that he was being used as a clown show. That all he would have to do is throw a swastika on his arm right now, and they would be jumping over themselves to try to get him on their show. And to have that as the representation of the black community is disgusting. So, is the media to blame? So, whenever Kanye just isn't really doing anything or stirring the pot, like I guess recently, he's of no use to them. So you don't hear about him. But I bet anything, all he would have to do is throw on a swastika and you wouldn't be able to avoid him. And the fact that the media, and I'm talking about the mainstream media and YouTube media, uses him for that's one conclusion I've already reached. But I'm willing to be proven wrong. But that's disgusting. He is not an example of the black community. He is an example of a bad person, regardless of his color. But he's manipulated and used, and that bothers me. So trust me, I have no love lost for that man. So I've laid out the groundwork. Now, don't worry, I'll still be doing my occasional funny history of PG-13 type videos. But this is a project I'm taking on. That as a middle class white person, I want to understand racism. Because I don't. And I want to. And I know that my father actually took a course on racism in America, and he's become a good resource for the historical aspects of it, along with the family in which he grew up in, which I believe he'll be honest and open about when I interview him and ask him some sensitive questions about the house he grew up in when the doors were closed during the civil rights movement. I wasn't alive for that. So this has gone on for 50 minutes. I need to go to bed. But I was debating not doing this tonight because I was kind of tired, but I had to get it out there. And I really hope that you'll join me on this project. And if there's anything I said tonight that terminology wise was wrong, please put it in the comments. I learn from you. However, when it comes to Obama, Robert Byrd, the situation with Town and Country Day Camp, the insurance company, hold up on opinions on those, just because I haven't done my research yet. I haven't formed an opinion on that yet. So everyone's opinion is encouraged, but more information has to be accrued. And on that note, I love each and every one of you. And I thank you in advance for being part of what's going to be a learning experience for me. And I'm not going to say I'm excited about it. I think that's the wrong word. But I'm looking forward to becoming a better person and enriching myself intellectually. Thank you. And I'll see you tomorrow.